My friends, there is a fire within you that has waited too long to be acknowledged. Most people wander through life possessed by their fears, impulses, and collective expectations, yet never stop to ask who is truly in command. Today I invite you to cross a threshold to take control of yourself. This is not about domination or suppression but about conscious mastery. The art of becoming who you are meant to be. To truly take control of yourself, you must first have the courage to enter the landscape of your own inner chaos. This chaos is not your enemy. It is a hidden map of all the forces and fragments that have shaped you. Many people spend their lives avoiding it, distracting themselves with noise, routines, or other people's opinions. Yet this avoidance only deepens their sense of being ruled by something unseen. When you choose to face your inner chaos, you are no longer its prisoner but its student. Sit quietly with your fears, resentments, and desires. Allow them to rise to the surface without judgment. Watch the old wounds, the forgotten memories, the emotions you were told were unacceptable. These elements are not obstacles to your growth but raw materials waiting to be understood and transformed. By meeting the chaos directly, you dissolve its power to control you from the shadows. It will feel uncomfortable, even threatening at first, but the act of seeing clearly is the first act of mastery. Out of the storm of your own unconscious patterns, a new order emerges. Not the brittle order of repression, but the living order of awareness. This is where self-control is born, not as domination over yourself, but as intimate knowledge of your own depths. Inside every human being lives a shadow, a collection of traits, impulses, and potentials you have rejected or disowned. It is the sum of what you have been taught to hide, deny, or feel ashamed of. Most people live as though their shadow does not exist, yet it operates beneath the surface, shaping decisions, reactions, and relationships in ways they cannot see. To take control of yourself, you must begin the courageous act of recognizing your shadow and inviting it into the light of consciousness. This does not mean acting out its impulses blindly, nor does it mean suppressing it further. It means meeting it with honesty and curiosity, asking what it has been trying to show you all along. Perhaps it holds your unexpressed anger, your unlived creativity, your disowned strength, or your forbidden tenderness. When you recognize your shadow, you gain the power of choice instead of being unconsciously driven. The very qualities you have buried often contain your deepest vitality. By acknowledging and integrating them, you stop projecting them onto others and begin to experience life with greater clarity and responsibility. The shadow's energy, once feared, becomes fuel for transformation. It adds depth, authenticity, and authority to your character. This integration is not a one-time event but a lifelong dialogue with your inner self. Every step toward recognizing your shadow is a step toward reclaiming the wholeness that has always been your birthright. To take control of yourself, you must step fully into the arena of personal responsibility. This means no longer placing your life, your moods, or your outcomes in the hands of other people, circumstances, or fate. Every time you blame someone else for your choices, you hand over your power. Every time you say, "They made me do it," or "I had no choice," you quietly surrender your sovereignty. Claiming responsibility does not mean you caused everything that has happened to you. Life is complex and often unfair, but it does mean you accept full ownership of how you respond and what you choose from this point forward. This shift from victimhood to authorship is one of the most liberating movements a person can make. When you own your choices, you stop waiting to be rescued or validated, and instead begin shaping your life consciously. This does not eliminate struggle, it deepens your capacity to meet struggle with clarity and strength. It also breeds self-respect, because you see yourself as a creator rather than a passenger. Every decision, large or small, becomes an opportunity to align with your values and your emerging identity. Over time, this practice builds an inner authority that cannot be shaken by external chaos. The world may still bring storms, but you will meet them as someone who knows they are steering their own ship. This is the essence of taking control of yourself. Not through rigid control over everything outside you, but through unwavering command of the one thing you can truly master: your own choices. Developing inner authority means cultivating a center of gravity within yourself so strong and clear that the noise of the world can no longer easily pull you off course. Most people are shaped by external authorities: family, culture, social media, institutions, and without realizing it they live by borrowed values, borrowed desires, and borrowed fears. This creates a life of quiet submission, where choices are made to please, conform, or avoid conflict rather than to express one's authentic self. To take control of yourself, you must begin the deliberate practice of listening inward, of asking, what do I truly believe? What feels aligned with my deepest nature? What am I called to create or stand for? At first, the inner voice may be faint, hidden under layers of conditioning. You may even mistake it for doubt or guilt because it challenges long-held assumptions. Yet as you continue to honor it, through reflection, journaling, meditation, or courageous acts of authenticity, that voice grows stronger, steadier, and more distinct. Inner authority is not about stubbornness or arrogance, it is about rootedness. It allows you to move through the world with flexibility but without losing your core. You no longer need to dominate or be dominated, you act from a grounded sense of, I choose. This inner authority also brings resilience. External approval or criticism still registers, but it does not define you. Praise doesn't inflate you, and rejection doesn't shatter you, because your compass no longer depends on the weather outside. Over time, you become a person of substance. Someone others trust, not because you follow the crowd, but because you are anchored in your own integrity. This is the fertile ground from which true leadership and authentic freedom grow, and it is an essential step in taking control of yourself. To truly take control of yourself, you must learn to live from your values rather than from your impulses. Impulses are like sudden gusts of wind. Powerful, unpredictable, and often rooted in unconscious needs or unexamined emotions. When you live at their mercy, your life becomes fragmented, reactive, and inconsistent. One day you feel motivated and disciplined. The next, you abandon your commitments because a fleeting mood or craving takes over. Values, on the other hand, are steady like the stars. They emerge from deep reflection on what matters most to you. Integrity, growth, compassion, creativity, excellence, freedom, or any other principle that resonates with your authentic self. When you align your daily actions with these values, you create a sense of inner order that no impulse can easily disrupt. This does not mean suppressing or denying your impulses. It means pausing long enough to ask whether they serve the life you're consciously building. Each moment of pause is an act of self-respect. You begin to see impulses not as commands but as information. Signals to be understood rather than obeyed. Over time, this practice cultivates a profound stability and coherence within you. People will notice it. They will sense your consistency, your reliability, your quiet strength. You become a person who can be trusted, including by yourself, because your choices flow from principle rather than from passing whims. This alignment also deepens your sense of freedom. When you live by values, you are no longer a puppet of your moods, habits, or other people's expectations. You walk a path that is both disciplined and alive, one that honors your humanity while guiding you toward your highest potential. This is how true self-control evolves, not as repression, but as a joyful fidelity to the deeper truths that give your life meaning. Mastering the power of reflection is the art of transforming raw experience into conscious growth. Most people move from day to day reacting, performing, and surviving, yet rarely pause long enough to ask what their experiences are trying to teach them. Without reflection, even the most profound events lose their power to shape character. They pass through like water through an open hand. Reflection, however, creates a vessel, a sacred space where insights can gather and deepen. It is not simply thinking about the past but holding your life gently in your awareness and letting patterns emerge. This can be done through journaling, meditation, quiet walks, or meaningful dialogue with a trusted friend. In these moments, you review your day and notice where you acted from your highest self and where you fell into old habits or unconscious reactions. Over time, this practice sharpens your inner observer, the part of you that can watch your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors without judgment but with honest curiosity. This observer is the true seat of self-control. The more clearly you see yourself, the more freedom you gain to choose differently next time. Reflection also helps you recognize cycles and triggers that otherwise control you from the shadows. You begin to see not only your mistakes but also your victories and quiet strengths, which builds confidence and self-trust. In Jungian terms, reflection is a dialogue between your conscious and unconscious minds, a bridge across which wisdom flows in both directions. Through this dialogue, the unconscious ceases to be a chaotic force and becomes a partner in your evolution. The practice of reflection slows you down, but in doing so it accelerates your growth, because each lesson learned is integrated rather than lost. When you master this power, you no longer drift through life on autopilot. You become deliberate, aware, and present, able to steer your own course with clarity. Reflection, then, is not a luxury but a discipline, a daily act of reclaiming your power to shape yourself from the inside out. Discipline, when seen only as restriction or punishment, feels like a heavy burden that robs life of spontaneity and joy. But when you begin to understand discipline as devotion, as a sacred practice of shaping your character, it becomes one of the most liberating forces in your life. True self-control does not come from forcing yourself into rigid obedience, but from willingly committing to a set of practices that nurture your highest self. Discipline becomes sacred when you stop viewing it as a war against your impulses and start seeing it as an act of love toward your future self. Each time you rise early to meditate, keep your word to yourself, or return to your creative work instead of indulging in distractions, you are affirming, "My deeper purpose matters." This sacred form of discipline gradually reshapes your identity. You stop being someone who occasionally does the right thing and start becoming someone who embodies consistency and integrity. This shift also alters how you experience struggle. The moments of resistance, when you least want to follow through, become opportunities to strengthen your will and deepen your self-respect. In the same way a sculptor removes excess stone to reveal the form within, your disciplined actions carve away your illusions, excuses, and fragmented habits, revealing the stronger and more integrated self beneath. Moreover, sacred discipline does not demand perfection, it demands presence. You will stumble, but each time you return to your practice, you reaffirm your commitment to your growth. Over time, your habits align seamlessly with your values, and self-control ceases to feel like a fight. It becomes a natural expression of who you are becoming. In this way, discipline ceases to be a cage and becomes a vessel. A structure strong enough to hold your evolving self, yet flexible enough to allow inspiration and joy to flow through it. This transformation of discipline into devotion marks a turning point on your journey to self-mastery, where control is no longer about domination but about reverence for the life you are consciously creating. Life constantly presents you with polarities: freedom and responsibility, strength and vulnerability, action and stillness, individuality and belonging. Most people feel pressured to choose one side of these opposites, believing that to embrace one is to reject the other. Yet real self-mastery begins when you stop trying to resolve these tensions through denial and instead allow them to coexist within you. Carl Jung often spoke of the tension of opposites as a crucible for transformation, a dynamic field where growth, creativity, and wholeness emerge. When you resist one pole and cling to the other, you remain split, reacting rather than integrating. But when you hold both consciously, you begin to perceive life's deeper pattern and feel its inherent balance. Embracing the tension of opposites means allowing paradox to live inside you without rushing to resolve it. This is uncomfortable at first, because the ego craves certainty and simplicity, yet the soul grows in complexity and depth. As you mature, you learn to stand in that tension without collapsing into extremes. You discover that vulnerability does not cancel out strength, it deepens it. Freedom does not negate responsibility, it gives it meaning. Stillness does not oppose action, it gives it power. In this way, opposites stop feeling like enemies and start revealing themselves as complementary forces working together to expand your consciousness. Practically, this means when faced with a decision or inner conflict, you pause to consider not only your preferred stance, but also the neglected opposite. Ask yourself, what truth might this other side be carrying for me? What part of my growth lives there? By doing this, you develop psychological flexibility and emotional intelligence. You become someone who can bridge contradictions, see multiple perspectives, and navigate complexity without losing your center. Over time, this ability grants you an uncommon steadiness. You are no longer torn apart by life's dualities. You are animated by them. This is not passivity but a higher form of mastery. A conscious integration that turns tension into energy and conflict into creative possibility. In learning to embrace the tension of opposites, you stop being a divided self and start becoming a whole one. Every human being carries immense reservoirs of energy, emotional, psychological, and spiritual. Yet much of it remains either repressed, misdirected, or dissipated in unproductive ways. Anger becomes bitterness, desire turns into compulsion, anxiety morphs into paralysis. But this same energy, if consciously channeled, can become the driving force behind your creativity, your transformation, and your deepest contributions to the world. To take control of yourself, you must first recognize that your emotions and impulses are not simply obstacles to be eliminated but raw materials to be shaped. They are signals from your unconscious, reservoirs of vitality waiting for direction. Channeling your energy creatively begins with awareness. Rather than judging your feelings as bad or inappropriate, you pause to understand their root. Where is this anger pointing? What unfulfilled longing lies behind this frustration? What hidden potential is concealed within this restless urge? By turning toward these emotions instead of suppressing them, you reclaim their power. You can then redirect that power into constructive channels: art, writing, movement, leadership, service, or innovation. This process transforms inner turbulence into outward expression, giving form and purpose to what was once chaotic. Creativity here is not limited to traditional art. It is any conscious act of shaping your inner energy into something life-giving. It might be designing a business, cultivating a garden, practicing martial arts, mentoring someone, or creating new rituals for your personal growth. Each act of creative channeling becomes a dialogue between your unconscious and your conscious self, a way of integrating parts of you that would otherwise stay fragmented. Over time, this practice builds resilience and self-respect. Instead of being at the mercy of your moods, you become an alchemist, turning lead into gold, darkness into insight, raw emotion into focused action. People who channel their energy creatively radiate vitality and presence because they are not leaking their life force through repression or impulsive discharge. They carry a quiet magnetism, born from the integration of their inner forces. This is the deeper meaning of self-control. Not the deadening of your passion, but its mastery, its transmutation into something meaningful and enduring. When you live this way, every surge of feeling becomes an opportunity, every inner storm a source of power, and every impulse a seed for creation rather than destruction. To live as an individuated being is to step fully into the life that is uniquely yours. A life guided not by imitation, conditioning, or fear, but by the integration of your conscious and unconscious selves. Individuation is the culmination of all the previous steps: facing your inner chaos, recognizing your shadow, claiming responsibility, developing inner authority, aligning with your values, reflecting deeply, transforming discipline, embracing opposites, and channeling your energy creatively. When these elements converge, you no longer live as a fragmented self trying to fit into someone else's template. You begin to live as a whole person, rooted in your own essence, radiating an authenticity that cannot be fabricated or faked. Living as an individuated being does not mean isolation or selfishness. It means being deeply anchored in who you are so you can participate in the world without losing yourself. You stop seeking validation as your primary compass, because your sense of worth is no longer tied to other people's approval. At the same time, you become more capable of genuine connection, because you meet others not as masks or projections but as fellow souls on their own paths. Your relationships gain depth and honesty, because you no longer need to manipulate, hide, or perform to be accepted. This way of living also brings a quiet freedom. You may still feel fear, doubt, or pain. These are human realities, but they no longer govern your choices. Instead, you act from a place of integration, where your instincts, emotions, thoughts, and aspirations work together rather than at cross purposes. You carry a sense of inner coherence that makes your actions deliberate, your words meaningful, and your presence steady. To live individuated is also to accept ongoing evolution. It is not a final state of perfection but a dynamic process of continual self-awareness and renewal. Each experience, each challenge, becomes an opportunity to deepen your authenticity and refine your alignment. In Jung's view, this is the true goal of life, to become who you are. Not as an abstract ideal but as a lived reality. When you embody individuation, you move through the world like a grounded yet radiant force. You are not easily swayed by trends, fears, or collective pressures. Yet you are also not rigid or closed off. You are a bridge between your inner depths and the external world, between your individuality and the collective. Your life becomes a message without words, an example of what it looks like to live awake, whole, and free. This is the highest expression of taking control of yourself, not controlling life, but becoming a conscious participant in it, aligned with your deepest truth, and able to bring forth your unique contribution to the greater whole. Taking control of yourself is the heroic act of your lifetime. It is not a single decision but a daily dialogue with your inner world. When you master this art, the external world no longer dictates your identity. You become a lighthouse, steady amid the storm, illuminating the path for others.